everybody. This is Tajikbay. It's 9:32 a.m. British time, and I'm recording this podcast, which is a little bit different from what I've done in the past. You kind of more used to me breaking down the fights and predicting fights and this and that. But in today's podcast, I want to talk a little bit about kind of break down the news and maybe share my perspective on how I see things. And there are a lot of things happening in MMA world outside of just fight themselves, like how the fights are built. We're going to talk about that with the recent kind of debacle of Benoit Saint-Denis and Dustin Poirier fight. The fight ended up being materialized, but there were some really hot discussion as far as like Dustin saying I never received the contract. I didn't sign up for this fight and stuff like that. Dana getting upset, and there's just a lot going on. I mean, this is just one of the examples. Then there are some things that happens after the fight that we know, that we learn, and we're going to talk about that as well. Like in case of Alex Volkanovski. Maybe we could start with that. It's not going to be a long podcast. So buckle up. It's going to be on all of the broadcasting and podcasting and broadcasting platforms. Apple, Spotify. So yeah, feel free to share it with your friends, MMA fans, peers, whatever. Thanks again for your support as always. If you want to check out my prediction and betting content, you can go to tajikbay.com or tajikbay@substack.com. So yeah, that's where I am. Or you can find me on Twitter as well at Tajikbay. So yeah. So let's get the show started, right? Like, it's a little bit sad because I want to talk about Alex Volkanovski. Alex Volkanovski said that, quote unquote, I was drinking every day before taking UFC title rematch versus Islam Makhachev. And he shed some perspective saying that he was injured and it's been a long wait and he was recovering from a surgery. And then this fight came up and, he felt a little bit overwhelmed by the idea of not being able to fully prepare for a rematch. And the first fight was really controversial, obviously. I personally scored between Makhachev and Volkanovski. I personally scored the fight for Volkanovski. I think he did enough. Although Volkanovski himself said that he thought that he did not do enough. But Volk is kind of that guy who is always like self-critical. I think he is breaking down the fights from a perspective of, he's answering like the wrong question. And I think the question he poses to himself is not that whether he thinks he won the fight, but whether he thinks he could have done better. Because when they asked him during the post-fight, he said, man, I could have pushed, I could have done this, that, and stuff like that. So I don't really think, I think if you look objectively, it was a very close fight. It could have gone either way. And like I said, I scored it for Volkanovski. And it was obviously all the more exciting, kind of stepping into the second fight, into a rematch to see Volkanovski, trying to, beat, Makhachev. And I predicted Makhachev to actually beat Volkanovski in the rematch just because Volkanovski is a puzzle, right? Was a puzzle for Makhachev. And I think the fighter Makhachev is like his fight IQ is really, really good. He had obviously more time to rehydrate during the fight, more favorable condition as opposed to fighting at home. This was one of the reasons why I picked Volkanovski to beat Islam in the first fight. So this was like apples to apples, fair and square. Yeah, but Islam was just much bigger, much more technical, and the fighter who already saw what Volkanovski has to offer. So when the end, and there are things happening in the background, as now we learn, because it looks like that Volkanovski has been drinking, and he was talking about that. He said, quote unquote, honestly, that's unheard of me, like drinking every day. I've never done that, but I'm not training as much, the surgery, and just keep trying to help around the house. I was like, all right, I'll have a couple of drinks here and there. They'll go down good. So it now kind of also makes sense why Makhachev was saying, oh, you took this fight for money. And it's like, I was like, what a strange line of attack. But, it's like with this Dagestani guys, it's just sometimes when they tell you something, it's not really like a trash talk. You know how they say like, oh, I don't like trash talk. It's a real talk, this, that, like Khabib used to say. It's like, he actually believed, and as we're learning it's true that Volk actually took this fight because of the money, because the incentives were good. Clearly, he was not in the best shape. Clearly, there were some things going on in the background. He wasn't prepared. There was a surgery, so it's like, and he admitted to it as well, saying, yeah, there was a financial motivation. And but I think there are two things, right? Like in terms of fighters. Time is also limited, right? Like you have to take as many financial opportunities and gains as you can, and while trying to maintain some kind of favorable fighting conditions, right? Like or competition. This was the first in terms of financial, but it wasn't the last part, right? Like of the statement is that you take a fight, but then you take a damage, right? Like you take a damage, and I think the implications for me as I'm looking into this, as he's stepping in to fight Ilia Topuria, and Makhachev said that he shouldn't be taking this fight. It's like I ask myself, is he making the same mistake by taking the fight against Ilia? Is it too early, too soon? Are the financial incentives there? Obviously, they are there, and is it a favorable matchup for him at this point in time? Stylistically, I'm going to break down this fight. This is not going to be today's podcast, right? But what I'm trying to say is that Volkanovski is coming into this fight with Ilia with kind of the same conditions, under the same conditions that he were prior to the second fight with Makhachev. He's getting paid, good. Is he in a prime condition right now? Probably not, because this was a very heavy KO, and we don't know how he's going to respond. Is he going to train? I mean, I don't know if there is enough time to train, because like you have to mitigate, right? Like your the damage that you took. This will take some recovery, and obviously there was some recovery after the surgery. So it's like it's accumulation of things. He's not in a like this prime age. There is obviously a prime. There is a difference in the age between Ilia and Volk. What is the age differential? Let's have a look at it real quick. I mean, this is 9 years of age, boys. I mean, yeah, that's is it 9 or even more than that? No, guys, 97 Ilia Topuria, and 1988 is Alex Volkanovski. So that's like good 11 years, boys. Yeah, like Father Time is undefeated, and that's kind of my point. I mean, you are a champ. Of course, you shouldn't turn away for every fights that are put in front of you, but I don't know if the timing is right, and that's what I think the main implication for me. That's what I'm trying to say, is that now we know that Volkanovski is vulnerable, like he's human. We all are, we all have our problems and stuff like that, and it looks like it's taking a toll on his performance while giving him some, financial gains. There's always a trade-off, boys, right? Like there's no like free cheese, like you put money somewhere and effort somewhere, like there will be a trade-off, in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, and then now looking into this fight, Ilia actually has come up and said, which is next news I want to discuss, is that I'm gonna knock him out in the first round. He's saying a lot of Ilia said, quote unquote, he's saying a lot of BS. There are levels. I have this, I have that, da da da. You're right. There are levels. There are levels, and then there is me. I'm going to show you where the levels are. I'm going to dominate him. I'm going to make him look like a punching bag. So, if you heard my breakdowns before, I always take a perspective of when the fight comes. Is like, what would prime Ilia, like let's say in this case, like prime Ilia versus prime Volk? And the answer for me is very, very simple. Prime Ilia, prime Volk will absolutely chew up Ilia, because I mean we've seen what Volk has done against the best strikers in the world. He fought who is who. I don't know if there were a lot of necessarily wrestlers in his life that he fought, like or grapplers, like of a strong caliber. Maybe you would say Makhachev, and so Makhachev did what he did, right? Like even in the first fight, let's see, he wrecked. It's not much though, right? Like 5 rounds they fought against Makhachev, and Makhachev racked up 4 takedowns. He's much more proficient wrestler, obviously, than Ilia, and 7 minutes of control time. So it's very hard to hold him down. Just in general, we learned that there's not much gain. You would have to have a crazy, grappling in order to submit or cause some trouble. So I think with Ilia also saying that he's gonna knock him out, let's find out like if his stats back it up. Ryan Hall KO, Jai Herbert KO second round, and then Damon Jackson KO in the first round. So I think Ilia is counting on the strengths that he already has, which is first round KO. So the mentality, I think, is somewhat, the plan is somewhat right in terms of like, I think what he's trying to do is to show absolutely no respect in that fight and go like all out against Volkanovski. And is this the right strategy? I think, yeah, because Volkanovski is going to be a little bit hesitant in the beginning, right? Like just to try to get into the rhythm of things, and yeah, with maybe a KO on his mind. But Volkanovski is a warrior. He's been into these battles. He fought who's who. So how are you gonna manage? My question is, what if you don't get the KO? Then what happens? And I think in terms of the not giving the respect to Volk, maybe Ilia is doing the right thing just to pump himself up. But in terms of the mentality, this is not the psychology that you want to come in with. Every time, if you work with the sports psychologists, and you understand the intricacy of things, that you should be able to train your mind or set your mindset to go all 3 rounds or all 5 rounds, and then try to find a finishing sequence if you can and capitalize on them. But the mindset has to be, I can go all 5 rounds. I can go all 3 rounds, and if I need to, I will finish, and if I have to, I will finish. But I just don't know. Maybe it's his youth or overconfidence. But going into this fight with a thought that a plan and a mindset that he's gonna knock Volk out, it has its own benefits for his good boost for his self-confidence. But I think in the reality of things, it has some pretty dangerous implications for Ilia, and I hope he, I'm not going to say doesn't mean it, but I hope he kind of keeps in mind the fact that he would have to go perhaps 5 rounds with Volkanovski, because Volkanovski is not an easy, an easy fight. He's a champ for a reason. He's one of the greatest of all time. And let's move to the next news, which I think is interesting, because it is with regards to Colby, and everything that Colby does or says in the MMA world is pretty interesting. He talked about the possibilities of, next opponent and who he might be interested or would prioritize fighting against. And so his number one choice, as he claims, is either Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Ian Machado Gary, or Gilbert Burns, which I think is interesting. I think at this point in time, with rise of Shafkat and just in general, I think the chances of Colby becoming a champion is gone. And I think I know there are a lot of fans of him and this and that, and who want to see him win, and I understand, but he's at the point in his career, just giving his dedication, commitment, time, and just in general, he needs to focus a little bit on the super fights. Not a little bit, I would say entirely. I'm trying to pull out his stats as far as like just to check his recent records, right? Like, so yeah, obviously, you fight like twice Kamaru and Leon, and his 2 wins are against Jorge Masvidal and Tyron Woodley. So I think can Colby contest for the title again? I mean, it's a very long shot. I mean, he's not as young anymore. He's not as agile, and we saw that, obviously Leon leveled up there's so many, you know, just beasts coming into who came into the division. So I think it's going to be very hard for Colby to contest for the title. Now, he needs to focus on the super fight. What does super fight mean? Super fight is a fight that, well, you can get paid properly. It's going to give you social media buzz. So it's not only just the money, but but the hype, hopefully pay-per-view shares if you think you can get something. And with Colby, it's been a bit issue. He kind of like chose in a Masvidal fight to go after just like a lump sum and not go for the rev share from the pay-per-view, which I think was a mistake probably. But his numbers previously haven't been good. Like in terms of the social media engagements, his numbers were good, but unfortunately it wasn't translating well in the pay-per-view sales. And the pay-per-view sales are just problem in general, because there's just some fighters who generate the high pay-per-views, and there are the rest. And there's no constantly one fighter, right? Like who generates the pay-per-view. These are just once in a lifetime athletes, like Conor. Maybe I would say Khabib, although I think for the most part it's probably going to be Conor, who come in and who can generate like a big numbers. Partially maybe John Jones a little bit too, but there are just so few of them. So I understand Colby, but you would kind of think that his social engagements would also translate into the pay-per-view, but that hasn't happened, and per UFC's expectation and his, so he chose to go for a lump sum. But in this case, Ian Gary is special, right? Like he's also stirring a lot of controversy, so I think it's a little bit different than matches with Leon Edwards and Kamaru, because Leon and Kamaru, they're not big pay-per-view guys who can generate something. And actually Ian Gary, with all the controversy surrounding his how he trash talks, that situation when people like to discuss his spouse and the relationship and this and that. I think it's like it's interesting. Like, I don't know if it's fun. I don't think it's funny, but it's interesting that Ian Gary kind of is getting more social traction from the situation with his partner, and people criticizing her and him for their relationship and stuff like that, than the fighting itself. I think it's very kind of rare phenomena where that happens. And most of the traffic, I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing. I think maybe for the personal side, it's not good, right? Like, and like we said, there's always trade-off. But for the engagements, like he's probably getting it. He's not probably getting the engagement that he wants, but in terms of the numbers, he's getting the desired outcomes, because people talk about his relationship, his personal side. I'm not gonna go dive into deep. I don't have a take. I don't like to talk about the personal stuff. Maybe some point in the future I'll break it down, but I just don't see much merit in terms of how it relates to MMA. You have to think through a contribution perspective. What are you really contributing by talking about Ian Gary Machado's wife? So I don't think there's much to talk about. But let's get back to Colby. Colby, number one choice. He said he talked about Ian Machado Gary. He talked about Stephen Thompson. So Stephen Thompson fight, as I think, is a good fight, a step in to get back into a title run. It will not give you money. Definitely don't see it as a pay-per-view attraction. So I think he's thinking very, very smart in that sense, in that if I fight Steven Wonderboy, I'm probably going to gain my confidence also back. I think this is a difference, right? Because if you fight with Stephen Thompson, like, I think he's stylistically and also just in generally, Colby needs a fight that he can win, and I think it's a winnable fight for him. And it has some kind of implications in terms of rankings and potentially getting a title shot. With Machado is straight numbers, and then you derail the train. And we know that UFC, in terms of meritocracy, really, meaning that giving the most deserved fighter a title shot is not really good, doing a good job at that. So let's say you beat Ian Machado Gary, just based on the hype that you get off of beating him, and if you beat him decisively, you can still even get the title shot, right? From the fan perspective, from the merit perspective, absolutely would be undeserved, but it's we're in a fight game, and in the fight game numbers speak, and yeah, I mean, I could totally see Ian goes there. Colby goes there if he stops or dominates Machado, then just a call out, and things go viral, and he's just right up there fighting, getting a title shot over so very many other people who deserved it. Yeah, that would be insane. Gilbert Burns is a little bit the same, but I think Gilbert Burns' fight is a little bit more competitive. I think why Colby likes this fight is because Gilbert, according to him, is beatable because he can put pressure on him. His wrestling is good for Colby compared to Gilbert, although Gilbert's grappling obviously probably going to be better. Gilbert has some problems in the past with cardio. He's, obviously, I'm not going to say past his prime, but not necessarily like at the peak of it, the height of his career. But he can give you a good fight, and he can he's a stepping stone, somebody that if you beat, you can get a title shot. So I think Colby, with his choices, is doing everything right. I mean, I don't know what's next for him, but he has to get back into the kind of like a game, and we cannot see him just being away for a prolonged period of times. And I don't think UFC also maybe wants that. Like, I think he should be a little bit more active, a little bit more engaged. I just question, I don't know, maybe it's early to say. Maybe his next fight will show, but I don't even know if his heart is just there as much as it used to be. Like, because he was so fired up with Kamaru and before. Like, I don't know. It remains to be seen, but Colby is obviously a star, a controversial star, who still has great upside to, having fun and making money. And I'm going to kind of discard his chances of winning title. So yeah, I think we spoke like at good lengths, and maybe another news we talk about, and we'll wrap this up. Let me know if you like this podcast, guys. So far it's been going for 23 minutes. I'll keep it down to like maybe under half an hour. So I want to discuss one more news, which I started this podcast with, and then we're gonna move. Thank you all, guys, again for tuning in. This is Tajikbay, and yeah, I'm breaking down the news. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Tajikbay, on my website at tajikbay.com, and on Substack at tajikbay.substack.com. So, and on all streaming, screaming, and broadcasting platforms. So yeah. So let's go with this final news. Was like Matt Brown is discussing the Dustin Poirier situation. So the thing that happened is this: Dana announced Benoit Saint-Denis and Dustin Poirier fight for which card was it? Was it UFC 299 or UFC 300? Yeah, I think it was for UFC 300. Yeah, sorry, 299. Yeah, 299. So Dana is revealing news almost new fights every day. So so it's not it's not unusual to get confused. But yeah, he said the fight is on. He announced the fight, and Dustin was like, we could not come to terms. Like, so I don't understand what's happening. And then after that, the fight was actually scheduled. Dana announced it, and he went after the journalist who told that, hey, this fight like didn't materialize. Dustin didn't know about it and stuff like that, and this and that. And so I think Ariel Helwani also talked about it, saying that it's kind of a tactics that UFC would do, just announce the fight prior to letting the fighter know, and then kind of like going. And then trying to deal and make the fight happen. Dustin came back and said, hey, like, oh, the fight is happening. Sorry, just caught up with my manager, this, that. So it was a miscommunication. So I think we have to understand this a little bit like this, right? Like, I brought this example, right? Like, and Dana also talked about it, right? Like he said that, fighting in the UFC is not a career, it's an opportunity, right? So and you obviously per UFC, UFC fighters are not employees and stuff like that, right? Like, so they don't have to take this fight, right? But bringing an analogy to bringing an analogy to, let's say, a contractual relationship, like if it's an Uber ride or a Lyft ride or stuff like that, right? Like, let's say you offered the fight or you offered a ride, you can refuse it, right? Okay, and then nothing happens, right? Obviously, if there's a continuous numbers of refusal, it's just an indication that you don't want to do the ride hailing or ride sharing service, right? Like, and maybe things will stop. But with the UFC, if you don't take a fight, that was it kind of like it's a situation where, let's say, per Lyft, right, like, or per Uber, you have already told the client that, hey, like, this driver is going to be arriving, like Mike will arrive to pick you up, and then Mike has to commit to it, and then Mike is like, well, I didn't know I have to commit to it. I thought I can choose, right? But you already told the rider that Mike is coming. And then if the fight doesn't happen, you said, hey, well, Mike is a bad guy, it's Mike's fault. No, you make some arrangement in the background, right? Let's say you accepted a ride, or you accepted you accepted the ride, and then you try to find a driver. So that's how I understand it. Like, I'm trying to bring it in a simple analogy, and I'm hoping like I'm doing the okay job. But that's the thing, right? Like, and so if the UFC had in mind that they need a fight, they want to book a fight between top contenders at like 170 or 155, doesn't matter. They ask themselves, what does that look like? And then somebody in the matchmaking says, well, the way it looks like is that maybe we want to go with Saint Denis and we want to go with Poirier. Then you reach out to both sides and then you agree. But this pressure tactic, I think, is bad for business, and I think it's bad for the fighters, because then if fighter backtracks and says like, I don't want this fight, then there is a pressure, or there is a thought that he or she's not going to get this opportunity to fight again, right? And there is a criticism from the fans saying, oh, like, you ducked the fight, you did not want to fight. So there's just so much going on. There's so many risks and implications, like negative implications for fighters, for organization, in not making the fight happen, like in announcing the fight before it agrees. I think this is like the old school mentality where I think would be probably spell. It's not going to end well for Dana, because Dana is rules with an iron fist, and in my opinion, and then this is kind of his mentality, right? Like, it's my way or highway, and I understand he has a very strong core, and whatever he did so far has worked for him, but things are moving, the world is evolving, and you're part of Endeavor now. Endeavor is a publicly traded company. There's just these relationships with fighters and with media. They have to evolve, and I think what's happening right now is kind of the beginning of the end for Dana White, in my opinion, because there will be more and more pressure and criticism with regards to this type of things, with announcing the fights or other things surrounding the management and matchmaking, that will put more and more pressure on Dana. And I just don't know if Dana knows anything better, and I don't know if the investors would necessarily be interested in having him handle things this way for a prolonged period of time. I just don't know that. I guess it depends, but we shall see. So yeah, so we covered a couple of news today. I think the thing here, honestly, I'd like to conclude this news, is that Matt Brown is obviously a company man. There's a reason why Dustin Poirier, is doing a good business for himself, making good money, and Matt Brown is just accepting the fights and getting paid, bare minimums, right? He's a company guy. right? Oh, I don't understand. You send the contract. You send the contract. No, my guy. Like that's yeah. But if it worked for you and you made millions and you made way more money, sarcastically I'm speaking right now, then do you think that then Dustin Poirier, then so be it? No, I think Dustin knows his worth, and I think Dustin is doing a good job, of like standing up for himself and getting himself, and letting Dana know that, hey, this type of games are not to be played with, and then they have implications. So maybe next time you announce the fight before you're talking to me, you will think twice. So yeah, I hope, all in all, let's conclude this. I hope Volk's problems, go away. He heals, from this. He will fight. He will come into Ilia fight in optimal shape. Hopefully, Ilia will mindset will be fixed and set to have a great competitive fight. Colby, would love to see Colby fight again next fight. I think a great matchup is probably going to be against Ian Gary Machado. And then Matt Brown probably should talk less and be a company guy, be less of that, and stand up for himself. Although it's a little bit too late because he's far into his career, and I'm not sure that him, agreeing to the fights does well. Him being agreeable, and I think Dustin should do what he continues to do. Maybe not the most favorable perspective, the way it's now looking is like, oh, he didn't take the fight, oh, he took fight late, oh, he misinformed, oh, it's miscommunication and stuff like that. But he's doing what he's supposed to do for himself, and I think every fighter, hopefully should be, will be treated the right way. And I think the takeout for Dana is that, like, stop this nonsense of announcing the fight before agreeing it with the fighters or their management. Guys, this is Tajikbay, 10:10 a.m. Just wanted to thank you again, and I think it turned out to be a decent podcast. If you like it, feel free to share it. Let me know what you think, if you want me to do it again, or maybe a news or perspective you want me to discuss, and I'll do it. So yeah, so long. Take care.